I spoke on Joshua, and I spoke on the children of Israel crossing the Jordan River. And it was a key point in their history of them finally entering into the promised land. Finally, after, how many generations from when God first spoke it to Abraham that they would be in the promised land. Finally now they are in the promised land. And so being and there's something about this, and as we read it, we're going to see that God is calling them to be fully committed to Him, to be fully on board with the things of His purposes for their lives and His plan for their lives. And so I believe that God would say to us today, and He would call us today, and I think that He always is calling us to be fully committed to Him, to be all in, to be 100% for Him and for His glory. And so anyways, if you'll read with me Joshua chapter 5, verse 2 through 5 up here. It says, "At that time the Lord said to Joshua, 'Make flint knives for yourself and circumcise the sons of Israel again the second time.' So Joshua made flint knives for himself and circumcised the sons of Israel at the hill of the foreskins." Isn't this an uncomfortable passage? I think it's a great way to start off. Yeah, sure. And this is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. It says, "All the people who came out of Egypt, who were males, all the men of war had died in the wilderness on the way, after they had come out of Egypt. For all the people who came out had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness on the way as they came out of Egypt had not been circumcised. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness till all the people who were men of war who came out of Egypt were consumed, because they did not obey the voice of the Lord, to whom the Lord swore that He would not show them the land which the Lord had sworn to their fathers that He would give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. Then Joshua circumcised their sons, whom he raised up in their place, for they were uncircumcised, because they had not been circumcised on the way. So it was, when they had finished circumcising all the people, that they stayed in their places in the camp till they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, 'This day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you.' Therefore, the name of the place is called Gilgal to this day." I think Gilgal means cutting off. Anyways, now the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight on the plains of Jericho. And they ate of the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. Then the manna ceased on the day after they'd eaten of the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted his eyes and he looked, and behold, a man stood opposite him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went to him, and he said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" So he said, "No." Interesting. "No. But as commander of the army of the Lord I have now come." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped, and said to him, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" Then the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Take your sandal off your foot, for the place where you stand is holy." And Joshua did so. Now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, and none came in. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and its mighty men of valor." I find this to be a really interesting passage of Scripture. I think one of the things that's very unique about this passage of Scripture is that he is meeting with this man who is the commander of the armies of heaven, basically, right? And he falls down and he worships him. You see, I believe that this is Jesus. I see no other possibility. That I don't see it can't be an angel, because every time an angel is worshipped that is a true angel of God, he would say, "No, don't do that." they can never receive worship because they know that belongs to the Lord. The other thing that's unique about it is that he says, take your sandals off your feet. The place where you stand is holy ground. If you remember Moses, when he meets before the Lord at the burning bush, God says to him, take your sandals off your feet, for the place you stand is holy ground. Right? And so I believe this is, they call it Christophany. It's Jesus appearing before he comes, born of the Virgin Mary. He's appearing to the people, and he's appearing to Joshua. And Jesus is a very different Jesus in this picture than we saw him when he came to the earth, right? This is more of like the Revelation Jesus with a sword in his hand. He's a mighty man of war, and he's giving Joshua the directions on how to take the city of Jericho. So, I think I have some things set up here. Okay. First of all, there's a renewal of the covenant. You see, today, I find it interesting, today we kind of made a covenant with God and with my children today. We made a covenant that we would raise them up in the ways of the Lord, that we would raise them to be Christ-like, that we would do devotions with them, that we would pray with them, that we would do what we could to raise them right. And that's what happened to the people of Israel. Now, what I want you to know and understand is when they are doing that, they're entering into a new place. They're into a whole nother area where they're not familiar with. The people of Israel, right? They've crossed the Jordan. They're on the other side of the Jordan. None of them, except for maybe the few spies, had been in the Promised Land before. And so everything is new for them. And so I believe this, that God in the covenant, the whole thing of the covenant, the whole thing of circumcision in the Old Testament was basically that, it was a cutting off, yes, but it symbolized the cutting off of things that were unholy and doing the things that are holy. And so God is always, I want to say this to you, God is always calling his people to be different than those around him, than those around them. They were to be special. They were to be unique. And the call of God on us as believers is to be different. It's to be holy. He says, be holy as I am holy. Be different. Be unique. There's something about that the God of creation does not want his children to just be like everybody else. Not in the sense that we're full of ourselves and we think that we're better than everybody else. Not in that sense, but in the sense that we know we have a purpose. We know God has a purpose for our lives, right? He wants us, those that know him, to be like him. If you grew up with a father in your household or a mother in your household, usually the male takes after the male and the female takes after the female, and they will pick up your mannerisms, won't they? If you have children, they will pick up your mannerisms, or you have picked up your parents' mannerisms. Some of the things that my parents did that I swore I would never do, those are the same things I do. Thank God we have a Heavenly Father that doesn't do anything that's bad. And so he wants us to be in close relationship with him so that it rubs off on us and it changes us. That we begin to become Christ-like. That we begin to be holy and unique and different. It's a laying down of our ways for his better ways. That we come before the Lord and we say, God, you know better than we do. We want your ways. We believe, God, that you created life. We believe that you through Jesus said that you promised to give us life and life abundantly. That you will give us a better life than we can make for ourselves. And the people of Israel are doing that on the other side when they're making this covenant with the Lord. They're saying, God, we trust you. That your ways are better than our ways. These guys are boldly entering into the promised land where no one for generations has gone before. They're boldly following God. And the third thing here is that they're fully committed and they're not looking back at Egypt. They're fully committed. When I say looking back at Egypt, all throughout the history up until this point of Israel, from the time they left Egypt for 40 years, they kept saying over and over, can't we just go back? Can't we go back? It was pretty good there, right? But it's like the person that has been in an abusive relationship that wants to go back to that relationship because they think, oh, you know what, it was safe or whatever, and they don't remember some of the bad things, and they think of all the good things. And so I think that is kind of us as people a lot of times. We as believers in Jesus can sometimes look back and pine for the days before we knew God at times. Oh, wasn't that great when I could just get drunk, right? Wasn't that great, when I could just sleep around? Wasn't that great when I could cheat somebody? Wasn't that great when I could manage my own life, right? Wasn't that great, and God has called us, and He had called the people of Israel to not look back, to not go back to those ways. And so this renewal of the covenant is a new and fresh commitment to them. They're saying, we're not going back. We're not going back there. We're coming here. Colossians 2, verse 11. I think it's up there. Thanks. It says this. In Him you were also circumcised by the circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of sins of the flesh by circumcision of Christ, buried with Him in baptism, in which you also were raised with Him through faith in the working of God, who raised Him from the dead. That baptism is that symbol of new life, and it's the cutting off of the old life and the old ways. You may have been in the past led about by any number of things, right? You may have been led about by lust or greed, envy, jealousy, all these different things. But now, when you are in Christ, you are a new creation. Those things shouldn't reign in your life anymore. And so there is this circumcision made without hands. It's like a circumcision of the heart that says, I'm going to cut off the unnecessary things. And I'm going to go fully after the things of God. I'm going to choose, once again, to lay down my ways because His ways are better. I'm going to choose to be fully committed to Jesus. I'm going to choose not to look back. I'm going to choose to be different, to know that I cannot let my life just be like everybody else's. I'm called to a purpose, for a plan. God has a destiny for me. The next part here is God is after utter or total dependence. He's after utter or total dependence. He wants those who will take everything to Him in prayer. Now, here's the thing. I want you to think about this for a moment. The people of Israel have crossed the Jordan, right? At the high point, it's at the flood point. The waters moved so they could cross on dry ground. They crossed, and just a short distance away from where they are is this massive city called Jericho that is fortified, that has walls that are, I think some say they're over 40 feet tall. That this is like the city that they would have to defend all of that promised land area, right? It's the first city that they would have to go through, and probably the toughest city to fight. And it is filled with it said mighty men, with warriors. And so God is calling, they're in a very precarious place, right? But God is calling them to trust Him. You see, they can't fight anybody for several days. If they hear on the other side, and they're stuck between the river and Jericho, between a rock and a hard place, and God says, now's the time to renew the covenant. This is when I want you to trust me in the hard place, in the tough place. You may be at a place in your life where you're going through some tough things, between a rock and a hard place, and God is saying, trust me in this. Give this to me. Trust me in this. Know that I'm worth it no matter the cost. And so here they are. They've done this, and it pretty much incapacitated all their men, all their fighting men. But they're trusting in God. God is wanting us to be in that place of total dependence on Him, where we say, God, this looks scary, this is crazy, but I trust you. I believe you. And if instead of worrying about things, if instead of being anxious about things, if we take those things to Him in prayer, and we regularly just lay them down at the altar. You know, I'm sure the people of Israel were like, God, here we are, God, protect us. Lord, you're our rock, you're our shield, you're our hiding place. You're the one we depend on, God. When we regularly confess that to Him, it helps us with our problems. It helps us with our anxiety. It helps us with our worries. We are relying on His strength and not our own ability. You see, that's the thing about God, is if you can do it yourself, then God's probably not so much in it. But when you can see, they're facing Jericho. When you're relying on God and you're saying, God, this seems crazy, but we trust you. This seems like it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't understand this, but I trust you, God. I believe you. When we're relying on Him for our strength and not our own ability, that's when I think the walls come down, right? That's when great things happen. My next point here is, I believe that fruitfulness comes from obedience. Isn't that so true? I think this. They are obedient in what? In going into the promised land and crossing the Jordan. Crossing it at the high point. They crossed it. They circumcised the men, right? They renewed the covenant with God, just as God had told them to do. And then what did they do right after that? They ate the fruit of the land. They were eating the fruit of the land. They were seeing the fruit of everything. And they believed Him. Those that wouldn't believe God died in the wilderness, right? They died in a place that wasn't comfortable, going around in circles, right? But as we trust in God, and as we work out our salvation, and as we believe in Him, I believe that there will be real fruit that comes from our lives and in our lives. David said, I would have lost heart unless I believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And he did. He saw that. There's a fruit that comes from obedience. The third thing down there is Abraham's obedience to God through committing to Him led to new life in his and Sarah's aged bodies, and they gave birth to Isaac, the son of the promise. So when that first covenant of that sign of the covenant, circumcision was brought into place, it was Abraham, and he was at that old age in his life, and Isaac had not yet been born. And God says, well, do this, make this covenant with me. And when he did it, it was like a year later. And there was life that came to these two old people that were beyond anything. But I believe this, that God can supernaturally quicken and bring life to your body and to you when you're obedient to Him. He can do all things. And when we obey God, when we put Him first, there's going to be a spiritual life that's manifest in our lives. There's going to be that. The third thing here, I'm going to end really soon here today. We're going to get to enjoy some food, but I believe this. Believe God in spite of appearances. Believe God. Jericho, once again, it's locked up. It's impenetrable. It's full of mighty warriors. But I believe this, that Jesus says to him, see, I've given Jericho into your hand. See, I've given it into your hand. It's locked up. It's built up. They're more ready than anything to face Israel. Israel doesn't have like siege equipment. You know how long it would take to build that stuff? Long time. And you know how many people would die trying to besiege a city like that? A lot of people. They don't have that. But yet, God says to him, He says, see, I've given it into your hand. He says that to him before he has it. Right? Before he has it. But I believe this, that God has tested them. Are they going to walk? Are they really going to go into the promised land? Are they going to believe my word? That I'm wanting to bless them? That I've brought them into this land? Are they going to believe that? Yeah. They said yes. Are they going to set foot into the Jordan? Are they going to put their feet in when it's wet and then the waters will be stopped? Yeah, they did that. On the other side, are they going to renew the covenant with me? Even though it incapacitates them? Even though it doesn't make a lot of sense? Are they going to do that? As we as the people of God, are we going to resist sin and expect that God will give us more joy from following Him? That His gift will be far greater than what we can earn of ourselves? Are we going to be the ones that look to Him to meet our needs and not ourselves? In our culture, the things that God has called us to do don't make a lot of sense. In our culture, in this culture, right, it's where it's all about what is your truth, right? And a lot of Christianity shouldn't make sense to our culture. But I believe that there's a blessing of God. We are the people of God, and we are drawn into fellowship with God through coming close to Him. Does God want everybody to come into fellowship with Him? Absolutely. Well, everybody. Unfortunately, I think not. But absolutely, He wants us to come here. Absolutely, He wants us to come into fellowship. Absolutely, He wants us to say, God, we trust you. And He wants us to believe in Him. Can you imagine the people of Israel? Now, they've done all this stuff. They followed God. They've seen some miracles. They've seen some good things. And now it's time. And Jesus says to Joshua, this is the battle plan. Walk around the city. For 6 days, walk around the city. Be quiet. Walk around the city. Be quiet. On the 7th day, walk around the city, blow the horns, and shout. And the walls are going to come down. For 6 days, that takes a lot of faith, right? You look probably pretty foolish. The people in Jericho are probably like, what is going on? They don't have any siege equipment. We're good. We're good, right?
Pastor Brad, how many people were there again, in Israelites again, about?
I don't know. Several 100,000, I'd say.
Yeah, so that's quite the truth.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the total numbers. I'm sure you could probably go back and see at least the amount of men, and then you could kind of extrapolate and figure out how many women and children and stuff.
They'd definitely be noticed.
Oh, they
all
knew.
Those people.
Yeah, they knew. Yeah. So, but it's like, do we believe? Do we believe that if you're battling with something in your life, if you're dealing with sickness or sin or whatever it is, if you're dealing with these things, do we believe that He's able? He's able, that we can go before Him and say, God, you are real. You are real, and you will give me the power to get through this thing. Do we believe? And there's a call to believe in spite of how it looks. Right? To believe that, for 6 days walking around Jericho. Why? Because we believe. On the 7th day, shout. Walk around and shout, blow the horns. Why? Because we believe. And we trust God. And He's got us this far. God has brought us this far in our lives with Him. He's brought us to this place. And I believe that He's calling us to a higher place. He's calling us even closer. There's a cost to that, for sure. But it's worth it. It's worth it. He's worth it. And you're worth it. So, let's stand together.